In this video, I try my hand at finger painting. Get it? Because I'm painting with my hand. Look, there really isn't a lot to sort of preface with. I'm going to be finger painting. I'm going for epic. Let's see if it can be done. Hadn't thought about what I'm going to make. I never do though. Something to do with a hand. I have an idea. Puppet. The puppet master. You know, like the hand that's like the looming hand? This is always a bit I find a little bit gross. I'm generally a very neat person. I hate this kind of art.
Did you say you were a neat person?
I am a neat person.
You looked in your studio.
All right, mister. All right, come on. Here we f***ing go. What a messy art studio. Mr.
Never looks like
You shit. I guess I'm going to start mixing colors and what better way to do it than on the canvas. The neater I try and be, the worse it looks. But when I sort of just move my fingers a little bit and get some texture, it's kind of cool. It pops for me more when there's a little more chaos. This area to me is already much cooler than here where I was like, I'm gonna be neat. Now, once I break my hesitance to being messy, it can become really satisfying. I've just got to take a deep breath and do it, because when you get in that stage where it's sort of flowing and it feels really cool, it can be really satisfying. It's a hard process to trust before you're doing it. I've covered every inch of the white canvas in color. I have a vision, a hand holding puppet strings and someone being puppeteered. But I want to block out a hand, and I want dramatic lighting and clarity in the silhouette. And I'm going to mix a skin tone, a wood tone, and maybe a tone for the lighting on the skin tone. Let's clean my brush. Let's go for it. So I lay down a foundation in this fairly contrasting dark tone. It's really hard to keep control of the silhouette so it looks nice and refined, but my hope is as I add layers of light, it's going to clarify the shape and give it a bit more cleanliness. Working up to the lights, it's just clear that it's going to have to be thicker and thicker with each layer, unless I dry between layers, which I can do, but I'm interested in just seeing how much I can work with it in one layer. I think in part because of the challenge aspect, but also because I think there's a lot I'm going to want to learn from other people before I dive in too deep, and this is still my dabble. So I'm really not happy with the silhouette or proportions of this hand that's holding the puppet strings. I try and rework it back a little bit by pushing some color from the background into the hand or adding a bit more. At the end of the day, I started with a very shaky, if not non-existent foundation. So I'm just allowing myself that this is the dabble, but I'm gonna have to come into my dive with a bit more of a plan and structure. Meanwhile, in terms of what's on the strings, I think I should keep it pretty simple. There's a large visual element of the hand of the puppet strings is pretty commanding and takes up a lot of the space. And I really like the environment of the chaotic color in the canvas, and even some of the drips that have sort of happened below as I've finger painted above. So I'm gonna just go for a really simple silhouette and as dainty as I can be with the puppet strings. How do you finger paint strings? I have an idea. This might go poorly. You ready? I need the long strand of the black, and I don't want a whole blob, but I just want gravity to make this work for me. Otherwise we'll end up with a sploop and it's gonna be terrible. Oh, that's a good one. Go on. It's not the worst. It's, there's a lineness to it, Now I'm nearing the end of this, and it is a dabble. I don't think there's a lot I want to do to the strings, because I know as soon as I go, yeah, see, it immediately just flattens and thickens. So my feelings on finger painting after my dabble, I think I like it, and I think I can like it more if I have a bit more of a method, and specifically, I think realistically, a bit more of a plan. I don't like the proportions of the hand. I love the background texture. I don't love some of the details, but I think lighting, if it's done right and if the silhouette is a bit cleaner, can be pretty strong. I actually think there's some strong elements of being able to get texture and contrast if you're daring enough. And I think this is a medium that makes you feel like you can be daring. I think that's probably the coolest bit. Let's have a look at what other people have done with finger painting before we dive. Start off with paintings by Justin. It works really good with naturalistic textures. Like the sky, those mountains look incredible. You actually get these organic mixes because there's less control. As soon as you lean too much on very controlled proportions or details, it's not the point of it, like the medium's not gonna help you. Then we have RM videos. That's really interesting. He's got a clean palm and he uses that to sort of spread a smooth gradient. That's so cool. All right, Art Insider. This is a story on Ira Scott, who I guess is someone who really lives and breathes in the finger painting medium. So how does someone like that work? With gloves. Look at that. It comes down to the same things. Vibrant color mixes and really leaning into texture and natural visuals. Christian Ramirez art. There's different effects. There's like the swipe and the way you get the gradients from the pre-mixing on your hands. There's the dabbing, which gets sort of like nice bush textures or clouds even. This is Slick Slime Slam. Wow. Okay, that's so cool. Ooh, very impressive. Color, texture, naturalism. Bam. Yasmin, painting using only my hands. Yeah, show me what you got. Look at that. This is like detail. You got nails! You got nails! I'm sabotaging myself. I'm a terrible nail biter. Do you know what? Let's start brainstorming with a massive canvas. And we're going bigger. Oh, it's too big.
That's what she said.
Now, I'm thinking dragon. Just hear me out. I know I do a lot of dragons, but one, it's something I'm familiar with and confident in, so I can be decisive and quick. Two, it'll allow me to be bold with colors because dragons usually have an element that they represent. But three, naturalism. So scales and textures that even though it's a creature or a beast, will lean into the strength, hopefully, of finger painting. Before we dive into it, I'm gonna sketch this time. I want a foundation to work from. All right, do you know what? Let's look up some references. Ice dragon. Let's do an ice dragon. Ooh, interesting. So what if, like this piece, but not composed like that, we go landscape first and then dragon in the landscape. Let's see what we can cook up. I think we've got a plan. There are three elements in this picture, so that's not too complicated. There's a background, dramatic, stormy sky, distant mountains. Let's get a bit of wind happening in there. There's a foreground with our hero who is us. And then we have the focal point, which is the dragon. So this is more than just a dragon. I could have just done a dragon portrait, but I think because I'm going for scale and I have this much scale to work with, I'm trying to amplify that and make it feel like rather than just a picture of a dragon, I want to encapsulate the feeling of meeting a dragon. Let's get our hands dirty, shall we? But just like with any piece, working on it in sections and usually from the back to front is the way to go. So I started with the sky, kept it pretty fast and loose, and I wanted to work in fairly flat areas just to get coverage first and slowly introduce a little bit of texture and a little bit of color. Then moving on to the mountains, I colored in the central areas of the mountains because I knew we'd be going up to white at the peaks. And after getting a little bit of coverage happening, started to move into texture throughout the mountains. This was pretty tricky because I needed the mountains to have some sort of physical form. I needed to accentuate lighting, so I wanted the right side of the mountains in my scene to be where the light is catching from. This is a lot of snow and it's a lot of wind, and it does hold the risk of being a little over textured. So I tried to walk that delicate balance, working all the way up to the sharp white peaks of the mountains, creating some contrast as I went and adding just the right amount of punch with texture wherever it felt in balance with the overall piece. Now with the environment mostly done, it was time to move on to the figures in the piece. Now, the foreground figure isn't the central figure. Obviously the dragon is gonna be the focal point. So I worked with really dark tones to make sure he felt very much in the foreground and also something that was clear, but not something we need to see detail of. My sneaky little plan, my theory was that if I lined up a gradient of paint on my palm, curled my fingers so it was tight and then dragged it out, stretching my finger out as I pulled, I could have a cape unrolling and flowing in the wind. I think it worked pretty well. Wherever I felt the need to correct it, I needed to hold myself back because that's where I risk overcorrecting or overworking an area. Now it's dragon time. Now, while I want this whole piece to feel really cold and dramatic, I also run the risk of, with everything sharing a similar palette, the dragon feeling a little muddy or falling into the background. So I knew I needed to create a little more contrast on the dragon to pull the eye in and mix in some hints of new colors. So I laid down a foundation of a nice crystalline blue, working up to highlights and a light blue and shadows with a bit more purple and black, starting to really create contrast. But it was the next steps that really brought the dragon to life. Starting off by introducing a bit more color, a touch of sharp green, which I slowly blended into the highlights of the dragon, which would create a focal point and a point of interest, a little bit of interesting lighting, and even a little bit more of a purple kick in the shadows. These hints of extra color make the dragon feel a little more magical and pull the eye a little bit more. It was then time to work in some more textures. Found that if I dried my fingers, I could tap them and create the feeling of scales without necessarily putting paint on my fingers. Just sort of disrupted the paint that was there. It brings detail in where detail sort of needs to be. And then of course I just have to hold myself back from overdoing it. And this is where I'm starting to think it might be ready for some finishing touches. Starting off with some allusion to teeth in the mouth, using pure white paint and flicking it out to have a nice thin peak. Made sure to get a really sharp and really strong dollop of white in the shape of an eye. With that done, and after a bit of drying, I had one last step to do. Fill in any areas of blank canvas and tie it all together with a bit more wind. So lying my canvas down and with the areas mostly dry, using nothing but white paint, I just dragged some wisps of snow being pulled through the wind, which helped separate the foreground and midground, that being the dragon, creating a bit more distance, a sense of scale, and also playing the secondary little trick of hiding some of my less refined shadowy areas. Now when you're nice and close like this, it looks pretty clearly finger painted. But you know what? I am so excited and proud that when you take a step back and soak it all in, it's pretty magic. I'm really happy. I thought this video would be battling against my impulse to make a silly show out of it because it feels like something that would be very hard, if not impossible, to make something decent. Turns out, if you have the right approach, if you have a plan, and if you work big enough, I mean, finger painting, hand painting, who'd have thought? I'm super chuffed. So chuffed, in fact, I'm actually gonna take this and give it to Alicia and ask her to turn it into a digital painting. So head on over to Insert Art because I'm gonna sit down with Alicia and go through the process of making this even more spectacular in Photoshop, digitally painted. In fact, at the time of recording this, I underestimated how insane Alicia would go. She animated the whole thing and we go into it in detail over on Insert Art. It's a wild ride and so epic. And it really is just the beginning of our collaborative atmosphere with our artists in the JAZZA'S Studios channel. So go check it out at Insert Art. If you're looking for a bit more of a chill vibe and a bit more of a group hangout, go over to Insert Art and subscribe. This was a lot of fun. Please like this video if you did enjoy it and subscribe for more fun with art and creativity. That is it for now, and until next time, I'll see you later.